If you took away tariffs, we could end up being a third world country. We're leading because of tariffs.
President Trump has tied his economic vision to tariffs. He recently warned that without them, the United States could slip into becoming a third world country. That message came just days after a federal appeals court ruled that much of his program, built on emergency powers, was unlawful. The administration is appealing, but the stakes are high.
And those sweeping tariffs have collected so far $210 billion. Now, if this appeal by the administration does not ultimately stand and the administration has to cease collecting tariffs on October 14th or has to pay back those tariffs, that gets a bit complicated.
If the Supreme Court does not side with the White House, the government may have to refund more than $200 billion already collected from American importers and retailers. Canada is watching closely. Prime Minister Mark Carney reminded Canadians that 85% of trade with the United States remains tariff-free under the current agreement. He described this as the best deal in the world, while noting sensitive sectors such as steel, aluminum, forestry, autos, and copper that need attention. The contrast is clear. Trump frames tariffs as a shield against collapse, while Canada emphasizes stability and preparation. Even before the court ruling, stress was visible in the American economy. The July job openings and labor turnover survey from the Bureau of Labor Statistics showed 7.18 million jobs available against 7.2 million people seeking work. For the first time in years, job seekers outnumbered open positions. The same month's employment report revealed only 73,000 jobs created nationwide, a sharp slowdown. Industries felt the pressure unevenly. Healthcare and social assistance lost 181,000 job openings in July. Retail trade dropped by 110,000. Construction, manufacturing, and wholesale trade saw modest gains. These shifts highlight how Americans are finding it harder to secure steady work, just as tariffs raised costs for businesses. The uncertainty over whether tariffs will survive in court adds another layer of strain.
I last spoke to the president Monday evening. We spoke at length on a wide range of issues, including on trade, but geopolitical, other issues, labor issues, etc. It was a good conversation.
Against this backdrop, under Carney's leadership, Canada is strengthening key industries at home and preparing to expand its trade relationships beyond the U.S., while still keeping most cross-border commerce stable and tariff-free. Mark Carney has emphasized that the foundation of North American trade remains intact. By pointing to the 85% of commerce that flows tariff-free, he sends a message of reassurance to both Canadian industries and American partners. He acknowledges the trouble spots openly. Steel, aluminum, autos, and pharmaceuticals are under pressure from Washington's tariff focus. But rather than react with fiery rhetoric, his government is preparing for the scheduled review of the Canada-United States-Mexico agreement next year. Carney also revealed that he held a lengthy conversation with President Trump on the 1st of September, covering trade as well as geopolitical and labor issues. At the same time, Canada's top civil servant was in Washington meeting with American counterparts. This careful but active diplomacy underlines a key difference. Where Trump leans on drama and constant warnings, Canada relies on quiet engagement and strategic groundwork. The signal to Canadians is that their country is not powerless in the face of tariffs, but has tools, alliances, and preparation on its side. The clash of approaches could not be clearer. Trump's gamble is to hold up tariffs as the shield for American prosperity, even as courts challenge their legality, and labor data shows the strain. Canada, meanwhile, practices strategic patience. By emphasizing long-term stability, preparing for the CUSMA review, and keeping diplomatic channels open, Ottawa positions itself as the responsible partner in North America. The months ahead will test which strategy prevails. If tariffs are struck down or forced to be repaid, Trump's economic cornerstone could crack. If they survive, costs will still weigh heavily on U.S. businesses and consumers. Either way, Canada shows that it is ready, not just reacting. That steadiness may ultimately prove to be the stronger force in shaping the future of continental trade.
We're going to bring it from 25% to 50%, the tariffs on steel into the United States of America.
The tariffs were initially only expected to hit raw materials, but now they include goods containing steel and aluminum.
President Trump's decision to raise tariffs on steel was meant to showcase economic muscle. By slapping a 50% levy on Canadian steel and aluminum, the White House believed jobs would flood back to American plants. Instead, the policy has set off chain reactions that Washington did not anticipate. In Quebec, Canada's small but growing can manufacturing sector has seen demand surge.
Since steel tariffs between Canada and the US came into effect, this Quebec food can maker has seen its sales more than double.
Before the tariffs, food companies relied almost entirely on American imports. Once the new costs hit, buyers began shifting to domestic supply. Sales doubled within months, and producers are now preparing to expand into Ontario. A new Windsor plant, scheduled to open in January, aims to produce more than 1 billion cans annually by 2028 and create over 100 jobs. Another facility in Hamilton will handle steel finishing that used to be done south of the border. What looks like a small story about cans illustrates a bigger truth. The tariffs meant to punish Canada are helping Canadian industry come back to life.
The tariffs could also impact the price you pay for groceries.
It's going to mean higher canned food prices across the board for American consumers.
The picture is very different in the United States. Manufacturers face higher costs, especially in the auto sector. PACCAR, a major U.S. truck maker, reported in late August that tariffs on steel, aluminum, and copper added $75 million in expenses in the third quarter alone. Meanwhile, Daimler Truck and Traton, building in Mexico under USMCA rules, sidestep these costs. Their vehicles can be 3% cheaper than those assembled in America. U.S. steelmakers are also expanding capacity aggressively. According to the Wall Street Journal, new projects will add 21 million tons, roughly a quarter of total American output in 2024. Yet demand from construction and autos remains weak. As a result, American steel has become the priciest in the world, sometimes $400 per ton above global benchmarks. This imbalance is already threatening output. Analysts expect an 11% drop in U.S. vehicle production by 2026 as costs flow through the supply chain. Builders also warn of higher housing and infrastructure costs as tariffs inflate raw material prices. The policy that was supposed to strengthen America is forcing both industry and consumers to pay more.
Aluminum, steel, autos, copper. They happen to have a specific on copper, and then, of course, lumber, softwood lumber, which has been an issue. So those are the areas where immediately we are focused on improving the outcome.
Canada has chosen not to mirror every American move.
In order to do that, we will have to look at other areas where we can have win-win cooperation, other areas.
Instead, Prime Minister Mark Carney announced a tariff reset in late August. Ottawa lifted some retaliatory measures on U.S. goods, but kept pressure on strategic sectors such as steel, aluminum, and autos. This approach preserves leverage while creating space for diplomacy. On the ground, Canadian firms are adjusting quickly. Food processors are sourcing cans at home, and Hamilton is preparing to host new steel finishing capacity. These long-term investments will take years to pay off, but they reduce reliance on the United States. Far from being cornered, Canada is using the tariff fight to strengthen domestic industry. Diplomatically, the reset produced immediate movement. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick hosted Canada's Trade Minister Dominic LeBlanc in Washington on August 26th for a 90-minute meeting. Officials on both sides described it as constructive. The Americans acknowledged that Canada's removal of some counter tariffs was a significant step, and discussions are now advancing more quickly. Beyond the negotiating table, Canada holds other forms of leverage. Canadian tourists once accounted for 10 to 15% of daily economic activity in Las Vegas. That flow has nearly disappeared, and businesses have noticed. For Trump, tariffs may be a favorite tool, but his advisors know that the uncertainty surrounding them undermines investment and confidence. This is where the contrast between the two leaders stands out. Trump thrives on disruption, using tariffs to keep partners off balance. Carney favors steadiness, protecting key industries, keeping doors open to negotiation, and supporting firms that turn hardship into opportunity. The steel gamble designed to break Canada is now backfiring at home, while Canada shows it can adapt, endure, and even outplay the United States in the long run.
There's likely to be a fourfold increase in the demand for critical minerals over the course of the next decade. So we're creating a rare earth magnet supply chain between Quebec, between Canada and Germany.
There is no doubt anymore. Trump's tariffs have pushed America's closest neighbor, Canada, to turn toward Europe. When Donald Trump slapped a 35% tariff on Canadian exports outside CUSMA this August, the expectation was clear. Canada would bend. Instead, Mark Carney flipped the script. He scaled back some counter tariffs while keeping steel, aluminum, and autos protected, signaling that Canada would not give away its leverage. That shift opened the door to something larger. Rather than fight Washington blow for blow, Ottawa turned to Europe, using its vast reserves of copper, lithium, and rare earth minerals to build new alliances. What began as a tariff assault quickly evolved into a story of how Canada could outplay Trump by turning resources into power.
Now, Germany has been amongst the leaders in beginning that diversification away from China, particularly China and Russia. Canada can play a role in accelerating that diversification for Germany and for Europe.
That strategy came into focus during Carney's European tour this August. His stops included Berlin, Warsaw, and Riga. But the most important outcome came in Germany. Canada and Germany issued a joint declaration to deepen cooperation on critical minerals, the raw materials that power everything from electric vehicles to wind turbines. Under the Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement, Canada already had preferential access to the European Union market. Carney used that framework to accelerate new projects in copper, lithium, and rare earths. For Germany, the timing was critical. Since cutting energy ties with Russia, Berlin has been searching for secure supply chains. For Canada, the partnership provided not only an economic outlet, but also a political counterbalance to Trump's tariffs. Instead of depending solely on the U.S. market, Canada was locking in opportunities across the Atlantic with Europe's largest economy as a new anchor.
What turned headlines into substance were the deals signed on the ground. In Berlin, Carney announced that Troy Gold, a Canadian mining company, secured a long-term copper supply contract with Arabis AG, a German smelting and recycling group. In Quebec, Tornat Metals entered into an agreement with VAC, one of the global leaders in rare earth magnets. This created a direct Canada-Germany supply chain for magnets essential to clean energy and defense industries. At the same time, Rocktech Lithium, a Canadian-German company, advanced a new lithium arrangement to support Europe's decarbonization plans. These transactions showed that Canada was not just making declarations, but building the physical trade flows that could sustain a rare earth alliance. Industry experts note that global demand for critical minerals is expected to quadruple by 2035, according to the International Energy Agency. By acting early, Canada positioned itself as a secure supplier for Europe at a moment when the United States was driving uncertainty with new tariffs. What Trump used as a blunt instrument, Ottawa turned into leverage.
Donald Trump helped us get here.
A lesson that our partners to the south, the Americans, have learned about the vulnerabilities in the rare earth magnet supply chain.
And so we need to move quickly.
The contrast could not be clearer. Trump relies on tariffs that disrupt trade and rattle markets. Canada focuses on partnerships that bring stability and predictability. By leaning into critical minerals and strengthening ties with Germany and the wider EU, Carney showed that Canada is not simply reacting to Washington's pressure, it is setting its own course. This strategy also gives Canada more influence in its dealings with the United States. Trump may dominate headlines with new tariff threats,
But Canada controls assets that Washington and its allies cannot ignore. Copper, lithium, and rare earth magnets are at the heart of the next-generation economy, and Canada is turning them into instruments of national strength. In this round of trade confrontation, Ottawa did more than withstand pressure. It shifted the board entirely. The message is clear. Trump can raise tariffs, but Canada now holds something more valuable: the trust of partners and the resources to power the future.